Welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 23rd of August, 2023, and this is the Cluster API project meeting. Cluster API is a sub-project of the Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidance, which basically means please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, which explicitly means please be kind to each other, and please raise your hand if you'd like to talk, and I will call on you, and yeah. So at the beginning of our meetings, we usually take a little time for new community members to introduce themselves. So I will be quiet for 30, 40 seconds. And if anyone would like to, please raise your hand and introduce yourself to the group. Or please just unmute and introduce yourself. Sorry. All right, I'm not seeing any unmuting happening, so I guess we will move on to the next section. So open proposal readout. Do we have any updates on the one open proposal we have? No updates? Okay, let's move on to our discussion topics then. Christian, it looks like you've got the first topic with an FYI. Please take it away.
Yep. I just wanted to give a heads up. During merging v1.28.0 for the tests for CAPI, we noticed our dual stack tests broke. The reason for that is a bug in the end-to-end tests in the conformance tests for Kubernetes v1.28.0. And it looks like it also doesn't get fixed for v1.28.1. So if you integrate v1.28.0 in your provider tests and have dual stack tests running, you could hit this issue. If you hear that now, it may help you getting faster to the solution here. There's a pull request out to fix it for the release branch, but it doesn't get merged currently because there's a freeze. So yeah. Basically, that's already it.
Cool. Thank you for bringing that up. That's definitely good to be aware of. Okay, Stefan, you've got the next couple topics. So please take it away.
Yeah, I just made it like one batch of topics. So first one, I would like to propose to promote Christian to Cluster API review. Can you open the PR? So basically, he's already a reviewer of a few individual areas. And I think he did really great work like last half year or something, or maybe longer, in a lot of places. Especially noteworthy, I think, like a lot of work on like CI and the CI team, but also just reviewing PRs across the code base, etc., etc. Also contributing a lot of PRs. I think it's even like already above 100 PRs. So I think that should make easily the bar of review for the entire repo. I'll just give a second for additional comments or concerns or whatever. But what I would propose is essentially like something like 1 week of lazy consensus. And if nothing comes up until then, I would merge it, or we would merge it. All right, moving on to the next one. So as probably almost everyone knows, Kubernetes 128 was released last week, Tuesday, I think. And we're now at a point where we are supporting 128 in core cluster API. What that essentially means is that on main and on the 1.5 release branch, we made all the changes to ensure that we support 128. There were only very little adjustments necessary for 128. So basically, I would assume, I would say, if you use CAPI 1.5.0, 128 should already work. We just made one change to pre-flight checks. Essentially, if you enable machine-side pre-flight checks, we had to extend the range because with Kubernetes 128, it's now possible to keep worker nodes on N-3. So we had to add some logic that for Kubernetes 128, we allowed it as well. But apart from this small limitation, 150 already works. Officially, we supported with 151, which should come out next week. And yeah, there was really going a lot of work into all of this. So thank you very much on everyone who helped there. So on main and on release 1.5, we did all the work so that Kapi can run on top of on top of Kubernetes 128, that it can manage workload clusters with 128, that we have the test coverage accordingly. And on main, we did additional work to bump controller runtime to 0.16 and all the Kubernetes dependencies. But that won't be cherry picked as usual. That's just on main and for cluster API 1.6. And also this time it's a lot easier to adopt to control runtime 0.16. So expect a very smooth upgrade compared to 0.15.
That's nice to hear. Were there any questions about the 1.28 update? It looks like no. I'd say move on to the
maybe one very small addition. We also already have it running on CapV, so we also have like confirmation from, let's call it, a real infrastructure provider. That also works there. Yeah, Fabrizio.
Yeah, just a quick thank you to you, Christian, release team, everyone involved, Kilian, everyone involved in this work. I just want to point out that we are getting, I think, really good in doing this bump or this activity that we are doing every release cycle. And so, because we have a prior art, we have expertise across the board. So if someone is looking for stuff to ramp up in cluster API, those are the kind of activity that are kind of easy, because you can look at previous PR, there are people that can help you, etc., etc. So this now 128 is getting to conclusion, but yeah, we have a lot of recurring activity that we are documenting, building knowledge, etc., etc. So if someone is looking for opportunity to contribute, this is a good area to look at.
Yeah, +1. Well said, Fabrizio.
Okay, then I would say the next one. Can you open the linked issue? So I don't know who was around like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, but at some point in the past we had a component called kube-rbac proxy, and okay, let me go one step further, back. So a while ago, basically the basic setup in cluster API and cluster API controllers was that we were deploying our controllers. We were deploying a sidecar called kube-rbac proxy. And we were exposing our metrics in a way that you could basically expose the metrics endpoint on HTTPS, but you needed authentication and authorization to actually get the metrics, which basically means you have to come with a service account, you need a corresponding cluster role, and then you were able to scrape the metrics. And then we basically dropped this feature because we didn't want to rely anymore on kube-rbac proxy, because it was basically a project hosted on a private GitHub account, and it didn't really make it into like Kubernetes org or something. So at this point, we dropped kube-rbac proxy. And since then, per default, our metrics endpoint is bound to localhost 8080, which essentially means, yeah, sure, you can still scrape metrics with port forward and proxy, and there's even a way to do it with Prometheus, but it's not exactly easy to do. So out of box, our experience was the metrics endpoint is more or less not accessible. And if you want to scrape metrics, then you have to bind it on 000, etc. But then it's just open. It's on HTTP. There's no authentication, no authorization. Usually that should be sort of fine, because they're not actually secrets or something on our in our metrics. But at the time, we still decided that it's like a secure device. It's just not safe. So that's why we went with the default of just binding into localhost and making it inaccessible. So what we can do now is the following. So basically, in the current control runtime release cycle, I built a feature into control runtime, which is basically the subset of kube-rbac proxy that we need, but as an optional feature in controller runtime. So what I'm basically proposing is to add a flag to cluster API, and exact flag name and semantic TBD, so that we can have secure metric serving, and I would actually make it a default. So it will be still able, we should be still able to turn it off and get a current behavior, but I would like to make it a default, essentially, that we are serving metrics on HTTPS behind authentication authorization. And the standard thing that we have to do is basically whoever gets the metrics needs that cluster role in the middle of that issue. And then when you actually do that scrape get request on the metrics, you just have to send a token. So basically in Prometheus, that's absolutely standard configuration because they already have to do it for controller manager, for scheduler, etc. That it's just the same feature that core Kubernetes components have. Yeah, I think that's the headline. So TLDR, I would make it a default, but it's still possible to get the current state, and out of the box it should just work essentially. And the nice thing is, if you use Prometheus in some sort of standard configuration, it will already have the cluster role. So you don't actually have to worry about a cluster role. It's just a matter of having the right configuration to scrape copy controllers and use the service account to do it, which is, as I said, pretty much standard for core Kubernetes components already.
Yeah, that sounds great. And Christian's got his hand up, so please go ahead, Christian.
Are there any considerations regarding that we have to do HTTPS here, or how is it done at the API server or so?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is essentially, as soon as you add authentication authorization, that means that you will send a service account token in a header via bearer scheme, and you don't want to do this via HTTP. So that's where HTTPS comes into play, that you don't want to leak service account tokens in plain text. That was the way you asked your question, right? Might have slightly misanswered it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so if we do this here now, it will also expose the metrics only via HTTPS? Or?
Yeah, I have to figure out the exact details of the flags, and we can do another round of discussion how this should look like. But I would basically have like one. So I also want to align to upstream Kubernetes as far as we can without breaking too much. So there's a small round of like flag design here. But I would say the default mode is definitely HTTPS and authentication authorization. And then there will be a way to turn off authentication authorization and a way to turn off HTTPS. I don't know if like all permutations will be possible, but definitely like the new one and the current one. And we have to see if like in between, there's also something that we want to make possible. But what I definitely don't want to make possible is using HTTP with authentication, because I don't want anyone to like be able to leak tokens just because they are doing weird stuff.
Fabrizio, please go ahead.
Definitely, this is cool. And I just want to add a note that we have to figure it out a way to not break users if we transition from one mode to another. So maybe we can have a soft transition now where the user is required to set some more flags and then make the default into 0. But yeah, let's figure it out on the issue.
Yep. Yep, makes sense. Let's discuss it there. I'm not sure how much we have to do or how it would exactly work, because essentially our current default is not really great. So my current take is that they probably have to set something, or they have to use some sort of proxy configuration. But yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll find a way. That's fine. Okay, if we're good about metrics, I have like one small follow-up, which is sort of related. And we have to do a bit more discussions on how to expose this feature. But essentially, what this brings into the capability that thing basically gives us is that we can have an endpoint and we can have authentication authorization. And another really nice feature that exists in upstream Kubernetes is that you can dynamically change the log level at runtime. So basically, if you have authentication authorization, the same story, service account, etc. And then if you do a put request on a certain endpoint on API server or controller manager, etc., then you can just change your log level, whatever you want. So that essentially means if you have an issue with a production controller, you don't have to restart it to change your log level, because restarting often fixes the problem. So, and that's like a sort of follow-up that I want to pitch after that one. As that we have to, especially for that, it will be a bit more complicated to end up with a good UX around command line flex, etc., and also try to align to upstream. But that's definitely something that should be also possible within the current release cycle to get that done. And of course, we'll write like recommendations for infra providers to do the same if they want to, etc., etc. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo the comments from Chad and whatnot. This sounds really cool. But I also kind of agree with Fabrizio. We need to like, it'd be nice to transition in a way that we kind of like do the least surprising thing for our users and whatnot. So just as long as it's a smooth transition to the new, secure metrics world, that would be great.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, any other questions or comments about the secure metric serving? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands going up. So Adil, you've got the next topic. Please take it away.
Yes, so this is a PR. It's improving the E2E config file. Instead of using the static versions, we are adding release labels and then we are resolving them. I need some reviews on it. I think Killian has, I fixed those changes that Killian has asked. So kindly review it and see how it's going.
Okay, great. Thanks for bringing it up, Adil. And yeah, if anyone out there is interested, please take a review on that. So I've got the next topic. Unless, I don't know, were there any other questions about Adil's PR? All right. So I've got the next topic. This is something I was thinking about for maybe a month or two now, and there's been more activity going on. So I'm just wanted to bring it and kind of into a discussion here. Like, do we, Carpenter is a cluster autoscaler that was created by AWS, and it's got a lot of really interesting features to it, and I think there's a lot of excitement in the community around it right now. And in the past, I had taken a look at trying to write a cluster API provider for Carpenter, but I think I might have been a little bit too early to the party, as it were. So I'm kind of curious just to reach out to the community here and see, should we maybe set up like a feature group or something to look into creating a CAPI provider for Carpenter, or perhaps seeing if there are ways that AWS users could use Carpenter with their CAPI clusters. I know some of this probably touches on the managed, managed clusters feature group, but really I was just curious to see if others are here are interested, or if people might want to, collaborate or something. There's an old issue here that was opened up last year about adding Carpenter support. And I think, there was a decent discussion, but then it kind of petered out and we never went anywhere. So I just wanted to bring up the issue here and see if others were interested, or maybe it's something the community would want to see. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up, so we will we'll leave it as an open question. I see Richard is interested. David, yeah, please go ahead.
I was just going to say it'd be good to just talk about any potential ideas that you may have around if you think Carpenter Core itself needs any or could have any changes that would help in that type of integration. I know they're trying to lock down right now on their beta API. So now's a good time. And it could be just rough ideas, but that's my only comment. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great comment, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring it to the group here, because maybe if there are some of us who are interested, we could start to look at kind of the code. And I looked at it back when they were in alpha. I haven't looked at it as much recently, but I did do some study up before this meeting. And so I think it would be interesting if maybe there are some of us who are curious about the code aspects of this, or making it happen for cluster API. Maybe we should get together and kind of like look at it and see, like, do we think it's possible? Are there any asks that we might have of the Carpenter community? Just to see like what our community's engagement with this is, because I think, for one, it would be interesting to have a cluster API provider. The last time I looked at it, it didn't. I think like I had difficulty getting cluster API to fit in with the model that they were using. But I think some of that has changed since the last time I looked at it. And so it's probably worth reviewing again. But then also I know we have AWS users who have asked about, like, can I add Carpenter to my cluster API, installation, and will it still work? And I think that's another interesting question to answer as well. So, I'm happy to continue looking at it, but I think it would be great to collaborate with some others and just kind of like share the load if we can.
Yeah, Jack has done a bunch of work there, but he's on leave. So I don't know the timing, but yeah, I think once he's back for sure, could chat with folks on his findings.
Okay. Well, maybe maybe what I'll do as a next step over the next couple of weeks is just see about getting like a doodle poll together to see if maybe we have interest to get, you know, a handful of us together, even just to talk about it. And then we could, if that works out, we could decide if we want to make a feature group or what we want to do. So thank you, you know, Richard and Stefan and David, you know, for kind of raising your interest. Okay, cool. Richard, I think you got the next topic with learning about CAPI. So please take it away.
Hello everyone. So I'm proposing, so in that discussion, I'm proposing that we record a number of short videos about learning CAPI from an end user point of view, not from a development point of view. And this came out of a discussion we had a long time ago in the office hours. So I finally got around to thinking about it. So I guess there's a couple of asks really is suggestions on topics. I think ideally they have to be small and digestible by people that are using CAPI. So for example, we get asked a lot, you know, how do I do GitOps with CAPI, for example? So we'd have a video on that. You know, what's the features of Kappa? But again, very, very focused. So I guess a couple of asks is, A, is it a good idea? B, are there any topics people think would be useful? Then also, if anyone's interested in co-hosting, I can get, I'll supply the StreamYard account and things like that, and get that from work. And then also we need guests and things like that for each of the areas. But yeah, feel free to, you know, add comments on this discussion, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea.
I personally think it's a great idea. Thanks for bringing it up, Richard. Does anyone else have comments about this or maybe ideas? Okay, cool. I'm seeing some support for this. So I think it's probably a good idea. Maybe, you know, the next step would just be to kind of continue the discussion in that thread and see if we can maybe figure out like what content we could start with. And, you know, I don't know if we want to get into a discussion of like, do we want to use like our, you know, we have like our logo and everything. Do we want to create some sort of like templating around our videos or whatever? Or do we want to have a cluster? I think we do have a cluster API playlist somewhere. You know, maybe we could add it to that, or, you know, so maybe some of these topics are things we want to bring out on the discussion. Okay, cool. Hey, if there's no more comments on that one, I think Furkat, you've got the next topic. Please take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. Quick updates on the release team activities. So first one is we'll be cutting v1.5.1 and 1.4.6 patch releases next week, Tuesday. And the next one is a team started using the GitHub boards to track release improvement issues. So here we can see all the issues, like release team worked on issues on this GitHub board. We modified a bit. I think it's very helpful to just go through them and see who's working on what, and easier probably for the community, hopefully, to track. Yeah, if you have any questions or like feedback on it, it's very helpful. I just wanted to bring this up and let the community know that we are kind of started using a new GitHub board for tracking these instead of like big umbrella issue that we used to have. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Thank you, Furkat. And that is, I like that. The improvement view is really nice. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our regular agenda today, and it looks like we've got no provider updates or feature group updates. Are there any ad hoc topics that people would like to bring up?
Hey, Mike, I was just raising my hand. I have a quick question for Furkat.
Hey, please.
Thanks. I was just wondering, Furkat, do you have a tentative time for the releases next Tuesday? I'd love to be around since we're going to be using the new automation for the first time.
Yeah, we haven't discussed it yet, but think with the same time where we have the CAPI release team meeting would work for you, or do we need some other time that we have to discuss beforehand?
We can follow up async, but yeah, I think that would work as long as it's a Pacific time friendly hour.
Yeah, sure. I'll then start a thread in the CAPI channel and see what time works best for everyone.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, criticisms, ad hoc topics? Otherwise, we can take about 30 minutes of our day back here. Okay, going in 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today, and we'll see you next week.